Hello, I'm Gary Ray Smith, the Knitting Man, and this is episode 4, How to Knit Corrugated Rib. Hello and welcome back. If you're new to this channel, what this channel is all about is improving people's colour work. So we want to take people from people that can knit, know how to knit, can knit something like that, and turning them into people that potentially can knit something like that. So that's the sort of thing you want to see. That's what we're here for. In this week's episode, we've got most of the episode is taken up with your questions, my answers to your questions, and then we've got our how-to this week, as I've already mentioned, is how to knit corrugated rib. We've got how to spot an imposter knitting man. But first of all, we've got travels with my yarn, and this week it was my lunch break. I was working on Friday, and during my lunch break I went round to see my grandson Atlas at his house. So we're in Falmouth. that was Falmouth, and that's one of my favourite places to knit, in that window overlooking the sea. I do like that. And also it's very close to my LYS, so if there's an emergency I can nip down to Stitches and Cream in Falmouth and buy anything that I might need. That was a beautiful day in Falmouth. I was actually working all day, and we filmed that during my lunch break, so I nipped back to see Atlas then. A lot of people have asked, they'd like to see Mrs. Smith in front of the camera. Well, I don't think it's going to happen. She's quite camera shy, but in case anybody's interested, she actually does really exist. If you're really interested, go to my Instagram page. I think I'm Gary Ray Smith on Instagram, and I put a cheeky little picture of her on during the week, and she's not spotted it yet. She's not made me take it down. So quick before she does, get over to my Instagram page and have a look, see what she looks like. She actually looks quite nice. And now we are going to go to questions and answers. So Mrs. Smith has done me a list of questions here. She's gone through and she's written out a list of the questions that she thinks that I ought to be answering. So I'll just kick off straight away with Erica. And Erica has asked, I'd be really interested in knowing what sort of yarn and wool you like to knit with these days, and if you have a preference for circular needles or DPNs. Well, given the choice, and generally when I go into knitting shops, because my stash is stupidly huge. I've been collecting it. Stop it. We've only just started and you've already kicked off. She's just big enough for her part, people. Oh, I've said it again. I don't know. Okay. Stop.
My stash is...
Sorry about that. We had to stop so Mrs. Smith could dry her eyes. Weirdly, we've just been playing on YouTube Perfect 10 by the Beautiful South and talking about how near the market was. Well, there you go. So anyway, I don't actually need to buy yarn. So if I go into a yarn shop, I quite often I do buy yarn because I feel like you need to support the shops. But generally, if I was to buy anything, it would be Spindrift by Jameson's. So I mean, I'd love to recreate this in Spindrift colours, and I tried to buy a Jameson's chart the other day on eBay, but I got pipped at the post. So, but if Jameson's want to, I'm not too proud. If Jameson's want to send me a colour chart, I'd be very happy. Thank you very much. So the other thing that she asked was about needles. Well, yeah, again, it's one of those things. It's not like, I mean, I've got some needles in packets here. Now they don't stay in packets for long. They end up on a whip or a UFO, and every time I try to find a set of needles, I have to go and start again. But yeah, generally I like a fixed circular needle, and that's because in the past I had an unfortunate event where I had an interchangeable, but this is going back years, so it's probably in the days when interchangeables were a new thing. But everything came off the needles, and it was a nightmare to put back together. It was in a bag, and it all came off the needles, and it was a real mess, and it was horrible. And so after that, I went back to using fixed. They're probably better now. So I'd probably like to use interchangeable needles because I like to cast on in a slightly smaller yarn, just for the first couple of rows before I start the rib. So it would be good if I was using interchangeables, but I don't have a set of interchangeables. So yeah, generally I use what's ever around, and I'm always, when I start a new project, I'm always scratching around for needles. There's never any, and invariably I will go out and buy a new set of needles. So but I don't have a preference for needles yet. I'm going to try these new Likey ones that my daughter bought me for my birthday. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But they look good. They look great. So yeah, and I'll let you know how I get on with those. So that's that question answered, I think. The next question comes from Susanna, and she says, your technique seems similar to Armenian knitting style used by Schiaparelli's knitters in her famous bow knot sweaters. Sorry, I'm struggling to read Mrs. Smith's writing here. In the 1920s and 30s, I would be interested to see more than one row of your trapping system to see how you keep your floats from lining up and causing a ribbing effect on the front side. So firstly, I didn't know that the Schiaparelli jumpers, obviously I'm aware of the Schiaparelli jumpers, but I didn't know that they used that system. I do get a lot of Scandinavian knitters, and they point me in the direction of Marta Stina Abrahamsdotter. So I better write that down for you in case people want to look. But when I look at her work, it's lovely. It's like a bit like Art Deco, but maybe sort of Shakerish looking blankets. They're lovely. Marta, has it got an H? Now I've lost my place. No, Marta Stina. Abraham's daughter. Lovely work, about 100 years old, so I hopefully you can read that if anybody wants to look into that. But she uses the same technique as I use. Well, lots of people do. I've had lots of feedback from people saying that they use that technique. So the answer to Susanna's question is that I don't try to stop the stitches lining up. So there is a texture on the front of my knitting. So if you look at, it's not something that bothers me. In actual fact, I kind of like it because I don't want to make something that's machine made. I want to make something that looks handmade. So I'm really, really happy with it. You know, I love looking at a Persian carpet of camels, and one camel's got, 3 legs, because you can see the hand of the maker. In actual fact, I was looking at a video of one of podcasts by Arnie and Carlos the other day, and they were talking about God being in the mistakes, and I totally agree with them. And I want to see things that look handmade. So did I show you the texture there? So you can probably, can you see it? Can you see, Joe, that there is actually a texture in what I knit, and I really love it. So it's not something that bothers me. So hopefully that's answered that question. Oh, and the other thing was, I was looking at a book, because this is something that when I started doing picture knits again, so we're looking around about 2014, 2015, I bought this book secondhand, and I mean it's absolutely crazy. The knitting in this book, I don't know if you can see, but that's like, knitted hundreds of years ago, and it's crazy. But if you look closer to it, you can see that texture is there, and they're using that same system. So hopefully that's answered that question. The next question comes from Jo, and she says, in a previous episode you mentioned that you'd like to get your yarn all together in one place. Have you considered some type of storage facility, possibly big enough for all your yarn, records and books and other rubbish you collect? Thank you for your question, Joe. No, I haven't considered that at all. But I would like to get my yarn back together. I'd like to get the band back together. I have considered a petition to Parliament, and if you can get 100,000 signatures, then they've got to discuss it in Parliament. Well, they've discussed more trivial things than that, so that could be a good thing. I could start a petition to get my yarn back together. Thank you.
You need to get your head back together and answer the questions.
So now back to the real questions. Jane says, I really enjoyed this episode. I don't know which episode it was. Obviously that was tagged to one episode. I would be interested to know if you take into account yarn dominance. Well, I don't know whether to explain yarn dominance first of all for people that don't know. But depending on how you hold the yarn within your hand, one yarn's more dominant than the other, so it comes out more dominant in your knitting. It's not something that I ever think about. It's not, I mean, really, I'm just sort of interested in the big picture, and I'm really interested in I'm always really interested in getting onto the next project and getting this one done so I can get on to the next one. So it's something I'm aware of, but it's not something that I ever really think about or worry about. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. So this is a question from Marina. Where can I purchase your patterns? I'd like to try the moth pattern. It's a bit all over the place at the moment because, as I mentioned in my first video, we only started really at the tail end of last year selling patterns. You know, for years and years and years I just do my thing, and I didn't really I didn't really think anybody else would be interested. So first of all, the bluebird pattern, which is that one. That was one of the original posters. So that's Vera's blanket. That's the only one that I've currently got on Ravelry. It's Doris's blanket. That's the only one that I've currently got on Ravelry. But we have been contemplating, because I know people do like these posters, getting them reprinted. But we did an original 50 copies, signed copies of the poster, and I don't want to do another signed copies run. So if we do it again, we'll get it on a thinner paper that can be folded up, because in a tube that costs a tenner to send to America. So with the price of the poster, it comes to quite a lot of money. So what we're going to do is try and halve the price, but do it as something that can be folded, and you'll get it in a small envelope. So if people are interested in that, let me know, and I will try to get those ordered and put them in my Etsy shop. So that's the only thing that's currently on Ravelry. So you can buy that as a download on Ravelry. Then we've got the Death's Head moths, which Marina was talking about. Thanks, Joe. That is currently only available as a poster in the Etsy shop. But again, I know that can be expensive for people, as opposed to what with the postage and everything. So I have been promising that I will put that in Ravelry, and I've been promising that for a couple of weeks, and it's just because I've been learning to video edit and everything else that goes with setting up a YouTube channel that I've not got round to putting those on Ravelry. but I'm going to make a firm promise now that they will be in Ravelry this week. And then the other thing that we've got, which is Artist Blanket, which is called Labour of Love Blanket. This one is currently only available in the Etsy shop, but again, I will get round at some point to putting it on Ravelry. And are those the only ones we've got at the moment, Joe? Yes? Thumbs up from Joe. They're the only ones we've got. 1, 2, 3. Cat.
It's right there.
Pass it over. And the cat one, which is I'd forgotten the cat. So the cat one, this is available only as a poster again in the Etsy shop. Doesn't matter. So these are the ones that are in Etsy at the moment are all 50 signed limited editions. There's only 50 of each. So that's the cat. So Etsy only for the cat. Okay, so that's the answer. So I've got 2 questions here from Thurl. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. One, when I'm doing my jumpers as I go along, do I swatch to get the tension right? Well, the answer is I know, because I'm using the same thickness of yarn, that I'm knitting 8 stitches to the inch. So I know, because I have a favourite size of needles, which is 3.5, and a favourite yarn that or a fingering weight yarn. So I know that I know what to cast on. So I don't need to swatch. If I swatch anything, and this is a swatch, and people say to me that's a huge swatch, but if I swatch anything these days, I'm usually swatching a design. So that's a swatch, or was a swatch, because I wanted to know this. That's a repeat pattern, and the red in this is moth holes that I've darned. But yeah, that's an old swatch of cherry blossom that I did a few years back. But it's a repeat pattern, so I wanted to get the whole of the repeat, which is 98 stitches square, I think, or is it 108? Doesn't matter. Okay, and Thurl's second question: when I make my V-neck sweaters, do I use a pattern or do I make it up as I go along? Well, for something like this, I don't ever use a pattern. I just make it up as I go along. And also, if I could tie in Sarah's question, because I mentioned Sarah's question last week, and Sarah's question was, please could you give me advice on choosing random adjacent colourwork pattern blocks on a garment? And I said that I talk about it in the next episode, but I think there's so much that I want to say about knitting these off-piste ferrule sweaters, that I'd probably just do a whole episode on it next week. So I'm kicking them into the long grass a bit, but the answer to the question is no, I just make it up on those, except if I'm doing something like this one, which is my Swallows jumper, where I did chart that, obviously, which in turn became, I mean, there's slight variance in the pattern between that. They are different patterns. They look very similar, but obviously they start from the same place. But on the back of Swallows, I made that up as I went along. So I was knitting that in the round, using a chart for knitting the front. I was following a chart that I'd drawn, but for the back, it was just like just make it up, which it felt a great thing to do. I think it's probably the first time that I've ever done that, where I'm doing two different styles really within one garment, and it knitted really quickly, because you always wanted to get onto the next bit. You wanted to get, back onto the ferrule. You wanted to get back onto the birds. So yeah, that was a really good thing, and I think I'll do that again in future. It actually had a jumper back in the 80s, and it was a ferrule jumper. It was a proper ferrule jumper, hand knitted jumper that I got from a charity shop. I do get a lot from charity shops. It had ferrule on the front and a plain back, and that was a common thing back then. And now I think when I knit, I want the back to be as interesting, even more interesting than the front. So, but yeah, let's talk about them next time. I'm going to do a whole thing on off-piste ferrule knitting, the whole episode. Okay, before I do the next question, mug of the week. Mrs. Smith's thumbsing up there. She loves mug of the week. It's her favourite section. It says, Grandad. Can you see it? You can see that, right? There's my finger in the way. So the next one is, Tracy, I'm happy to see that you two tangle your yarn while you're doing colour work. And Jane, it's the same subject. Just wondering about your yarn management. Your yarns seem to be wrapping around each other when you're on the beach. So I've got this bit of rib that I've got out to use for later on when we're doing how to do corrugated rib. And what I tend to do when my yarns are all tangled up is I get my thumbnail and I run it down the twisted up yarn like that. And Mrs. Smith hates it. It puts her teeth on edge, and I think lots of tiny fibres go out into the air and they set off her wool allergy. Well, it's actually a yarn allergy, because the other day I was doing it with cotton, which isn't wool, and she was still coughing and sneezing. So maybe it is a yarn allergy that she's not got. It might be a wool allergy, or it might be a Gary allergy. Next question is from Jane, and she says, how much yarn did you use for your Death's Head Moths blanket? Well, and she asked for yardage, and I never know the answer, because generally I'm working from, I don't know what's on anything, nothing's got a label on it, so really the only thing that I can do is tell you how much the finished thing weighs. So it was knitted in a fingering weight yarns, and when finished it weighed 12 ounces. Melissa says, Newfoundland Canadians know who the Two Ronnies are. My dad watched it every week. Well, the strange thing is, I went on one of my videos on YouTube this morning, and it tried to link to the Four Candles sketch by the Two Ronnies. If you haven't seen it, it's very funny. Oh, Mrs. Smith was just throwing everything on the floor there. The next question is from Carol. After seeing Brambles, everyone loves Brambles, it's hard for me to envisage anyone working a pattern like that from their mind's eye and not from a chart. If it would be possible, can you explain how it's done without a chart, as most people would have a picture in front of them, most probably a chart, so they can go line by line? Okay, so back in the 80s, when I was originally doing picture knits, I started off charting things. But by the 90s, I would just draw a shape on a piece of paper. So for instance, and I've got a jumper like this somewhere, so I might just draw a jumper like that and draw a teapot, say, shape, probably a bit more detailed than the one I'm drawing here with some flowers on. So I might just draw something as basic as that, and that's what I was tending to knit from. I wasn't charting it up, but you get to you get an idea of the shape that you're creating within the colour work. So I've had quite a lot of practice of it. So going back to Brambles, when I started Brambles, I think I might have had, I don't think I had a chart, but I might have had a rough drawing. I might have charted it, I don't know, because they do start, both sides start off pretty much the same. So I might have charted it, but I don't really follow the charts anyway. After, you know, I follow the drawing perhaps, because I can see the angle that's going and the angle that's going, but I don't follow the chart rigidly. Which is why it's been really nice for me to actually see the work of some people, since some people have done my bluebird pattern where they've actually stuck to the chart. So it's been nice, because obviously theirs is all perfect, much more perfect than mine, because I'm just a bit, is it lazy? No, it's not lazy. It's that thing where I want to get on to the next thing, you know. I haven't got, you know, I've got to get it finished so I can get on to them, get the next one done. But at the moment, I'm in this little lull between, I finished the Death's Head Moths. I know that there's a new project going to start, which I'm going to film the whole process for you, so you can see really from inception all the way through to completion. And thanks for everyone that said tiger, or nobody did say tiger, everyone said polar bear. But since then we've been thinking about a tree, so it's, but you know, it's all in the air at the moment. The next one is very much a concept, so we'll see how it goes. I've gone completely off the question. Can't even remember what the question is, to be honest, but I'll just have another little cheeky look at the question. Don't turn it off, Joe, and I'll see if I can pick it back up again. There we are. Not there, not there. I've even lost the question because it's over here. So Carol, Carol's one of our regulars. Hello Carol, by the way. So how do I do it? Just practice, really. It's just practice. So if I've started off with it clearly defined, you know, as I've gone up, it's got looser. So they've become, I mean, now I'm doing these random flowers. The random flowers are random everywhere. The back's completely different to the front now. So they've both gone off in a different direction. But Brambles is very much experimental. So, but yeah, I don't really, I can work without even a drawing probably. I've done it so long, you know, I can just knit a picture if I wanted to. So hopefully that answers the question. Thank you. Okay, well, I know that might have thrown up more questions than answers, but if you do have any questions, put them below, and next time we do a Q&A, we'll try and answer them there. Except if your name's Joe, I'd rather not have any questions from Joe again. Didn't really like that question. It was a bit near the mark, really, wasn't it? It's only been 3 weeks we've been doing this podcast, but there are already copycat knitting man, and Joe filmed one last night while we were in a restaurant. So here is a clip of a fake knitting man.
Hello, I am the knitting man, and these are my needles. And this is how you knit. Across, down, across, down. Fight, 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 stop. Okay, one more time and listen. Across and down, across and down. Fight, 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 stop. You must stop, or people, particularly children, will be hurt. That's the first lesson from me, the knitting man.
That was my brother-in-law, Matthew Graham, pretending to be me there. So if anybody does approach you in a bar or a restaurant with straws pretending to be a knitting man, it's probably not me. So now we're going to go over to a real how-to, and this week the how-to is how to knit corrugated rib. Okay, so I was asked how I hold my yarn when I'm knitting two colours. Well, they're usually quite twisted up, and I usually just wrap the yarn around my little finger, and so I've got one on top and one below. So we are doing corrugated rib. Now you can knit this the other way, and if anybody wants me to show you how to knit the other way, we can do that in another episode. But because I usually knit this in the round, I'm just going to show you how it's knitted front ways. But if you want me to show you how it's knitted back ways, I can do that in another episode. Just ask me in the comments below. So it's 2 knit stitches. So I'm just going to knit the 2 knit stitches, and then it's bring the yarn forward. So I'm bringing the lighter colour yarn forward and purl, and then 2 knit stitches again. Bring the yarn forward, purl, and take the yarn back. So 2 knit stitches, yarn forward, 2 purl stitches, yarn back, 2 knit stitches, yarn forward, 2 purl stitches, yarn back. And I'll just do it one time really slow now. So it's knit, knit, yarn forward, purl, purl, yarn back. That's 2 stitch corrugated rib. So thank you for joining us on this episode. We seem to be having more and more fun making them, so as long as people keep subscribing, that's the thing that's going to drive us, and so far we're very happy. But if you haven't, can you please subscribe, because that will encourage us to make more episodes. I'm Gary Ray Smith on Instagram. I've already talked earlier today about where you can find my patterns. So yes, it's good night from me, and it's good night from her.